And we are live, guys. I am coming to you from Vietnam once again. With us, we have James. How are you doing?
Very good. Happy Monday. Hope everybody's doing well.
I hope so too. It's always the best day of the week, Monday, when we have DCA, and we have a packed agenda. We're going to talk about Bitcoin's next move because I think it's driven a lot by the macro chart. So that's why it's so great to understand what is really going on and what is going on with US debt. It's spiraling out of control. Then we will talk about the solo money. We will talk about what has come up again now. Is Bitcoin a pump and dump? Are we all disillusioned here? And what is happening with another big exchange, Huobi? Is it insolvent? What's happening with the USDT? We will talk about the cashless society, and we will talk about when is actually alt season. Is it ever coming back, or are altcoins over now that we have the SEC going on harder than ever on all altcoins and everything? Did I miss something, James?
No, well, and anything else that jumps in while we're live, we'll just tackle that as it comes. There was a little bit of breaking news, which we can chat about later, but we'll see. Well, one of the big macro things is it's summer. Nothing really happens in summer except CTO goes on vacation to Vietnam.
Exactly.
And once that happens, everything stays flat. So that's how it works.
Exactly. Sadly, guys, I'm not driving the market while on holidays. So that's a joke. That's a joke. I'm not driving the market. My uncle isn't running the market. We can only observe this $500 billion asset and try to understand what is going on. So what's your take, James, on the price action? If we look at the chart, volatility is almost at all-time low. Nothing is really happening. We've moved up, we've consolidated in a channel, we've moved up, we've consolidated again in another channel. Not much has happened, really. What is your take? Is it because we're on vacation or is it something else?
Well, there's some very strange things happening, and they've been happening for a while. One, it's pretty clear that we're 250 days away from the halving. You've got big institutional money all piping up. You've got TradFi coming into crypto in a very big way, very fast. Almost every day there's a new release. There was another one this morning. We can talk about later. But what I think is probably most interesting is I spend a lot of time looking at on-chain data and try to find out what the big players are doing. And that tells you an awful lot. And when you see the 10,000 plus holders and the 1,000 plus holders accumulating, and then retail is selling, that is concerning. And then when you look at other stuff like 78% of all Bitcoin is held by long-term holders, there's not a lot out there to be moved. And of course, exchanges are having their issues. It's all playing into a very perfect storm. So I would, like you, probably very much like to see. I was able to nail that $25,021 dip we had a while back. I think it was June 13th or 14th. I'd love to see another one of those before rocket ships. But right now, with the level of accumulation, I kind of don't see that happening. I do have one little chart I can share with you if you can see that.
Let me bring it up.
But this little chart here is about the accumulation ratio of Bitcoin, and it's a technical indicator that measures the ratio of coins that have been held for more than 1 year to the total supply of coins. And you can see immediately that the blue line above the green line is different from previous bear cycles and bottom cycles. And this, one of the things that I always felt was important is if it wasn't for black swan after black swan after black swan, I firmly believe Bitcoin probably would have bottomed around 30 to 25K. But it was brought so much lower by so much capitulation and cascading liquidations, etc. That's a big problem. And that's represented here when you compare the bottoms to previous cycles. We went way beyond the bottom. And this indicator curve here is currently at 2.04, which means the majority of Bitcoins are being held by long-term holders. And this suggests that the market is still in the value zone and that a bull market is underway, but it's the early bull, not the full bull. And when the indicator falls below 2.04 and continues to decline, it signals we are going full bull. That sounds funny, full bull. But this is when, you watch the long-term holders carefully, because when they start to sell their coins, that's when we're getting to the level where when they start taking profit, that's the time as well to consider we're getting close to a top. And that's about the 0.83 to the 0.34 zone. You'll see there at the bottom of the chart in the pink area here. So I just thought that was a super interesting chart to look at as to kind of where we are in the cycle. So for me, it's all about how much has been accumulated by who, how much is left. That's why I believe there's a couple of things that are different in this market. One, front running is happening because there's way more education out there. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry knows, and Susan and Mary and Jane, they know that the halving is coming. They know Bitcoin goes up for the halving, and they know after the halving it goes up a lot more. And therefore, everybody's kind of getting in early. And we're also seeing other things happening where people just aren't selling. At least the smart people aren't selling. The retail investors are still believing some of the stuff that we're going back to 15,000 on the internet and Twitter. And that's just all misinformation right now. So that's my take of where Bitcoin is. But the volatility is, flatline, but that's to be expected in the summer too. Once we get through September, rocket ship.
Yeah, I think also, if we zoom out a little bit, we are in the situation where we are consolidating below key multi-year resistance. We are hesitating. It feels like forever, but actually not much is happening here. As we can see, these movements are really, really, really small. And of course, it's possible to try to trade this if we zoom in. Actually, the internet here is a little bit slower than usual. But we did reach we had this well-defined range. We broke down. We reached exactly the range target. But these movements are $1,000 basically, $1,500. So it's not why we're all here. I think to try to nail these small movements. And by probability, when there is a hesitation, when there is a consolidation like this, of course we don't know the future, but more often than 50%, after a period of hesitation, we continue in the direction of the dominating trend. That's just a probabilistic fact. It's more likely that the trend continues than it reverses, and still the trend is up. The direction of the latest major move, the previous major move, has been up. That means that we have chances of a continuation and breakout here. And for the more carefully inclined, of course, it's possible to wait for a clear breakout once it happens. And who knows, perhaps we consolidate further. If we do that with the trend up, I will see that as a buying opportunity personally.
Yeah, there's one other angle as well, which probably isn't portrayed here in this chart. And that is like companies like MicroStrategy are selling $750 million worth of stock. If you pull up that chart, you'll see craziness happening. And, that's basically share dilution. 13% is being added to the float. Stock is tanking. It's going no bid. It fell $105 in like 3 weeks, which is insane.
Yeah.
But once they get that cash, that will be deployed into Bitcoin, and that'll also elevate the price. So looking at this chart right now, for me, it looks like it's going to go down like 28.3, hit that short-term holder price point, or even further. But with that buying pressure, that may not happen. So that's the other angle I think is important to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that we nothing has really changed from my perspective. We're hovering here, lower resistance, consolidation is expected, but fundamentally, I think nothing has changed. So let's continue with the agenda, because I think that what is really short term, determining a lot of the direction of Bitcoin's short term moves in these periods of very low volatility, is a lot what's happening with the macro charts. So we see that on a daily basis, if we look at the direction of the dollar strength index or with the direction of the 2-year yield, it's inversely correlated with Bitcoin. So if this one goes down, Bitcoin goes up. If this one goes up, Bitcoin goes down. So trying to understand what's happening with the yield curves, what's happening with the US dollar, is short term a great clue to try to guess in which direction the next major move of Bitcoin will be. Will we get a decisive breakout in Bitcoin through this resistance and be off to the races, or will we have a longer period of consolidation first? There are clues in the macro charts, no doubt. And James, you always have good insights. What do you see happening with the yields? If we talk about that first.
Yeah, I'd like to actually zoom out a little bit further. So yields are a function of kind of what the Fed and the Treasury are actually trying to do. But I think we need to look at things like global liquidity, which has actually just gone up a little bit. Also, the US M2 money supply went up by 3.6% over the last 2 months, I think, which is incredible. But the biggest problem is, when is the next big dump of money printing going to happen? And this, if I could share a chart again, I put this together in 2022. And this is the deficit to GDP and the public debt to GDP ratios out to 2090. And I forecast we'll be at $3 trillion, $3,000 trillion in debt. I don't even know what 3,000 times a trillion is. I'm sure there's a better number for that, but that shows you where we're going. And because the Fed, because they're increasing interest rates, and so are other places, central banks around the world, and they all have huge debt burdens, they're also making their deficits worse. And like literally, this is spinning out of control so fast. There's a couple of things happening behind the scenes, and I'm always trying to ask, why are they doing such things? So when you look at the Fed themselves, they are exploding the debt, exploding the deficit. They're going to be paying over $1 trillion on interest, and it's going to go to 1.2 trillion, 1.4 trillion, 1.6 trillion as we go forward, and deficits will explode. Also, the governments need to rely on people, worker bees like you and me, to pay taxes. But now our cost of capital is going up, which means we have less taxes to pay, which means the deficits are going to go up more. So we're going way beyond the point of no return. And that makes me think maybe this is all planned. This is all about a big, great reset. And this is a chart here my friend Sanjay sent to me from Bank of America. And it's not even the truth because it's published by the government. But this is the US debt. It's now on track. And just try to understand these numbers. US debt only. Same thing's happening in the UK. Same thing's happening in European Central Bank. Same thing's happening in Australia, etc. $5.2 billion a day for the next 10 years. Out to 2033, US debt will hit 50 trillion. Okay, that's nearly double what it is now. And a large part of the government revenue, like it's already, you could argue 20% of government revenue is going to service the debt, but that's going to go a lot higher. There's going to go nearly half of all the money that's out there will be going to service debt. And the question is, how can this all end? And the answer is badly. And the answer is a ton of money printing is coming. Even just looking at that debt, to support that debt, there'll be a lot more money printing. And when you go from, what are we at now, 33 trillion to 50 trillion, it will be more like 65, 66 trillion by my math. But that is, I mean, the numbers are just beyond comprehension right now. They already are beyond comprehension. And that's why I make videos. That's why you make videos. That's why people need hard assets. And even if nothing ever happened with Bitcoin, it's going to go up because the dollar is going to go down. And that's the big message here for everybody. And that's what's terrifying. And if I was running a government and I had a long-term seat, okay, I'm responsible for, say, the US government balance sheet for the next 10 years, I would quit and I would run to a desert island and hide because this is such an ominous situation. There's no way out. And everything they're doing is making it worse, which means they want to implode the system, move everything to a big bank that maybe is in cahoots with the government. And then that's it. It's just, I can't understand what's happening.
Exactly. I also can't understand what's happening. And actually this week I really tried. I thought that, okay, enough hand waving. I really need to try to understand this. But as you say, central government debt as percentage of GDP, it wasn't that high not so many years ago. Like 2007 feels like yesterday, 2010, 2000. But then it went up here to 120%. So the debt, 120% of the GDP. And then if looking at other countries, this is really, that's a lot. There's a huge, I mean, US is in the lead by far in looking at the current debt in trillions, 30 trillion is more than the four next ones together. China, Japan,
that's
France,
old
Italy,
data because
India.
it's more than 33 trillion now. So
Exactly, and
you how
this is
fast
old
it's going
data.
up.
Yeah, it's old data. It's old data. It's even more. It is spiraling out of control, and I felt I have to try to understand. I wrote. I asked Raoul Paul, Paul, if I pronounce it right.
Paul.
What is his take on this? Is it spiraling out of control or not? What will actually happen? He replied here, what it means is that as rates rise, they have to issue more bonds to pay the higher interest, which causes rates to rise further. The answer is for inflation to collapse to allow them to drop rates back to GDP growth, so it is more easily fundable, or do yield curve control to cap them. And how is this going to happen? I don't see it succeeding in a smooth way. This is not under control at this point. I don't know if this was, if this was your or my economy, we couldn't sleep at night. This is looking disastrous for the United States, actually, isn't it?
The previous chart you showed with the debt to GDP ratio, once an economy goes beyond 77% debt to GDP, there's no way of getting back. There's no way of growing the economy fast enough and charging the taxpayers enough dollars to get back beyond that. It's just beyond the tipping point. And we are now nearly double that tipping point, and we're getting there. And that's why it's just this whole fiat currency thing. This explains as well why I think there's a huge move towards central bank digital currencies, where not only can governments do things like yield curve control, but they can also control exactly how the money supply is used, or move to a cashless society and really implement proper control of who spends what, where, and when, and how. That's kind of where we're going. And that's the Orwellian version of the world that's coming too.
It is. So yeah, we really spiraling out of control here. And I feel it sometimes. It feels like, am I crazy or is everyone else crazy? Because I mean, Bitcoin really offers a better alternative here, but it's really portrayed as the scam, while it seems like it's the legacy system that has become a scam in a way, because this seems out of control and it's kind of only pushing the problems into the future for our children to sort out or something. But it seems really difficult actually to sort out, which leads us to the next question, because you sent the next topic. You sent a very interesting quote, James, from this guy that we have seen as a meme many times. But let's read it and let's talk about this a little bit. So the GM of the BIS said that the soul of money is trust. So the question becomes, which institution is best placed to generate trust? I will argue that central banks have been and continue to be the institutions best placed to provide trust in the digital age. And he is kind of saying here that it's not given. that it is the central banks. He, without probably realizing it, he is actually considering the possibility that it could be something else than the central banks. That's what I see. That's why this quote is so fascinating. I hadn't actually seen it before until you sent it, James. Is that your
It's
take? What do you see from this? Of course, it's funny, but it's also
there's
deep in a way.
yeah, and there's so much to dig into this here, but let me just go on a little bit of a rant. And this is really important for everybody to teach their children. First of all, there's a term called gaslighting, and that's what I think he's trying to do to the world. And the whole expression that the soul of money and trust is a reference to the fact that money is the only valuable asset because people believe it is valuable. Okay. And the danger is if people lose trust in money, then it has no value. It's just paper. And the printing of money is beginning to lead to a loss of trust. You know, you can be in the back of a taxi cab, or you can talk to your mailman, and they all know the money printing is happening. It's not a secret anymore. And this basically is what leads to inflation. You know, people pretend, oh, it's supply chain, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. No, it's I can't remember the economic expression, but it is a monetary phenomenon. Basically, inflation is caused by too much money printing. Now, what's crazy is inflation is when the price of goods and services rise, which means that the value of money decreases. And if people's money loses value, they lose trust in money. So the expression that the soul of money is trust is completely illogical when so much money is printed. And people like Satoshi Nakamoto saw this in 2008, 2009 with the great financial crisis. And also the phrase, I don't want to use it, but central banks personified, and the settlement for international, whatever, Bank for International Settlement, the BIS. There's a great video about those guys and what they actually do, and how it's like 6 people in a room in Switzerland that control everything. And they do nothing but line their pockets. But the visual of the picture you're showing is basically central banks personified. And that is, they're not just institutions, they have personalities. And they are often being seen as cold, calculating, and ruthless. And that type of gaslighting of the people is unforgivable. We are not stupid anymore. Augustus Carstens, whatever your name is. We're not freaking stupid. We understand what's happening here, and we understand what you're doing. So I hope I didn't get too political or offend any fans of Mr. Carstens. But it's just comical for him to say that.
Exactly. So I think that this leads into something that I saw just before our last episodes a week ago. I mentioned it. It was the Yuval Harari interview on the Lex Friedman podcast, and I've linked it in the description below. I think I can't play it here because it becomes copyright, but I can read what he said, because I want us to discuss about this. So this is the author of Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, which is a very insightful book. And he said like this about this specifically a couple of weeks ago. He said like this: it's the same thing with economics. People think, oh, economics, this is rational. It has nothing to do with fictional stories. No, money is the most successful story ever told. Much more successful than any religious mythology. Not everyone believes in God or in the same God, but almost everyone believes in money, even though it's just a figment of our imagination. You take these green pieces of paper, dollars, they have no value. You can't eat them, you can't drink them. Today, most dollars are not even pieces of paper. They are just electronic information passing between computers. We value them just for one reason, that you have the best storytellers in the world, the bankers, the finance ministers, all these people, they are the best storytellers ever. They tell us a story that this green little piece of paper or this bit of information is worth a banana. as long as everyone believes it, it works. Then he said, if you start a new cryptocurrency, if you are the only one that believes the story, again, with cryptocurrencies, you have the math, of course, but ultimately it's storytelling. You're selling people a story. If nobody believes your story, you don't have anything. But if a lot of people believe the Bitcoin story, then Bitcoin can be worth thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. Again, why? I mean, you can't eat it, you can't drink it, it's nothing. It's this story around the math, which is the real magic, he said. And this is one of the most insightful people on the planet and has studied human history maybe more than anyone else, at least in the way that I could digest it. And he's basically saying that there is nothing saying that Bitcoin can't be the story just because we have the fiat story today. They are the same thing. It's just about we choose to believe in this or that. And coming back to this gentleman from the central, representing the central banks, saying basically that he thinks, of course, the central banks are the best placed to issue this kind of trust. But actually, that's just an opinion. That's one opinion. Perhaps that won't be the future. Perhaps it will be more mathematical system controlled by no one that you can't really manipulate, just like Satoshi Nakamoto started with. So this has been a big kind of insight for me. What's your thoughts hearing this, James?
Yeah, it echoes exactly what I just said about kind of central banks and money and BIS and everything else. And that is the gig is up, as they say. Everybody is aware now of exactly what these are doing. And this all stems back to, I think, the series of gaslighting that governments, etc. I just wrote that in the comments. Institutions. Let me see. We have somebody there. There's somebody just saying crazy stuff. Anyway, we saw this all happen in 2020 when we were warned about certain things that you'd have taken heed. You happen to be in a country that ignored all those warnings, and I was always fascinated by that whole Sweden case study about what happened in 2020 and 2021, and it was remarkable how your country became the kind of like beacon of light on the earth for everything. But anyway, we're not going to go in there. But yeah, the whole money thing, the whole centralized authority thing, the whole control thing is just very, very strange, very bizarre. And we need something else. In fact, let's talk about something else. People want to hear about crypto and Bitcoin and altcoins and stuff. I think
exactly. So let's move on. So Bitcoin, I think I put here is Bitcoin a pump and dump. Clearly, it is not, because this is coming up again and again. It is not a pump and dump because then it doesn't pump a second time. And Bitcoin is in a cycle. It is continuing to pump. It doesn't burst like a bubble did. People compare it with the tulip bubble and so on. But even if you go back and look at the chart, there is nothing these charts have in common, and I think that should be obvious to everyone. Should we move on? What's happening with exchanges?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of concern about that over the past couple of weeks. In fact, there is a fellow, Adam Cochran, I think, on Twitter. Everybody should follow him and watch what's going on there. But apparently Huobi is deeply, deeply insolvent. And Adam has done amazing work on this over the last few weeks. He's been watching what's happening on chain and everything else. What concerns me, though, is, if Huobi blows up, it's probably like a mini gray swan. But the concern is they are kind of in bed with CZ at Binance. And I don't know what type of knock-on effects they have working with each other. So here you can see how they are deeply insolvent. Apparently, according to Adam Cochran, based on what they owe to what they have, there's a 90% hole. Now, there's some funny games happening between Binance and Huobi regarding things like Tron, UST, not USDT, UST, and playing games with funny tokens that have no values, etc. It's another house of cards, and I'm afraid that maybe this could blow up and this could bring us down a little bit. But then again, Huobi itself by itself doesn't really matter too much. But what does matter is what the impact that could have on Binance. That matters. And it's crazy to see all the shell games that are happening, the movement of money around wallets, the creation of artificial tokens that have no purpose, the minting of stable coins, and then the hiding of those stable coins and the immediate conversion of thable stable coins into stable coins that actually have value, like Tether, then the impact on Tether. I mean, it's all, I just hope it doesn't lead to a big cascading liquidation. That is my fear, but I think it's only 10-20% chance of that happening. But that could be the next big thing on the horizon for me. That's why I'm concerned. Not Huobi by itself, but Huobi knock-on effect to Binance, to Tether, etc.
Do you trust any of the stable coins at this point? I mean, it's something that a lot of people ask, and I used to have a clear answer, but then now I don't have any more. Actually, what do you feel about the stable coins? Is there anything that we can trust?
It's funny. I always say, have your tap dancing shoes on, because the space moves so fast. If you asked me that question in 2022, I would have said Circle USDC was the safest of all. I wasn't trusting of Tether's balance sheet. But now Tether, they have, I think, the 11th biggest Bitcoin wallet. They have, I can't remember the exact number, but approximately $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin last time I checked. And that's actually been very profitable for them. They started buying at the dip, and they're allocating they basically excess interest. So stable coins are like money machines. No wonder folks like BlackRock and PayPal are seeing this and go, whoa, why aren't we in on this business? So imagine you hold people's cash, okay? And you generate 5% return on that in US treasuries. And you're holding 60 billion, 70 billion of it. It makes huge money. Like, forget Bitcoin ETFs. Stablecoins is where the cash is at these high interest rates. And I think everybody's kind of looking at these. So what Tether have done, they've robustified their balance sheet, their backup reserves. I think they probably did have some hole. Maybe it was 3%, maybe it was 7% 1 or 2 years ago. Today, with what they've done with Bitcoin by allocating part of their reserves, a la the whole what Luna tried to do when they saw they had problems, they tried to turn into a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin instead of an algorithmic stablecoin, which for me was an extremely interesting mathematical model. But anyway, we all know what happened there. But that is kind of the craziness in which we are in today. I think the world is waking up to stablecoins. I think stablecoins are a key part of the crypto infrastructure. And I do believe that the US economy should embrace stablecoins because they actually make the US dollar stronger. So, yeah, Tether would be the safe one for me now today. Different to USDC last year.
It's definitely. Let's move on to cashless society. We make an effort to get through all the agenda points. And let's talk about the cashless society. I mean, Vietnam now, here there are these bills. This is 2,000. See if I can get focus on that. So this is 2,000. We have 100,000 here. That's so here everyone rich.
Will that buy you a coffee?
I end up having like a bunch of these in my pocket. That's how we operate here. When I'm in Sweden, I haven't seen cash for like a year. No one uses cash. You can't pay with cash anymore in most places. If you go into a cafe and want to buy coffee, they won't give you coffee if you're trying to pay with cash. You can't buy a shirt with cash. You can't pay for most things with cash anymore. I'm not saying that is good, because we have in a democratic way decided that we're going to use cash after all, but then the shops can decide to not kind of accept it. And it has, of course, a lot of convenience for that. And in today's society in Sweden, it's great. No problem. It's very convenient. But if we're kind of thinking forward here, if these are CBDCs or something like that, what will this society look like if we don't have any freedom anymore? We can't buy things as we like. Someone else at the central bank is deciding how much of our salary we are allowed to spend on coffee, how much we're allowed to spend on beer and travel to vacation
Bitcoin.
to Vietnam. Maybe spending too much on that. Maybe I should spend more on tomatoes and vegetables instead, for example. So how do you see this? It's quite different in the US. You have cash is still widely used. How do you see this whole development?
Not really. Well, there's one little picture I did prepare for you, and that is the map of what's happening around the world with central bank digital currencies. I'll spend one brief second on this, but you can see kind of launched Nigeria in winning place. They have launched their CBDC called the e-Naira. And there's a knock-on effect of that. Then you got pilot countries, Canada, etc. You got research/pilot. There's lots of rumors that technically Australia's been testing one since 2022. We don't know exactly where that is. A lot of weird information there. A couple of places tried and canceled. But the point is, they're coming, no doubt. But the most important thing is, look what happens when you launch a CBDC. What becomes very popular, and that is crypto. So it is actually extremely helpful for Bitcoin and Bitcoin's popularity once they do launch these things. These things are coming, kind of like all the stuff we spoke about earlier, the deficits, the debt spiraling out of control, banks becoming hurt, cashless society, great reset. I think it all links together somehow. And there are people that have a master plan. That's why maybe Augustus gaslights us, telling us we need to trust the money. That's the future. So I think cashless is definitely coming. People are losing trust in it. I think, we're going to come back in the future to some type of barter economy. And the governments think they can actually control and quash things like crypto. They can't. As long as you have two people who are aligned, there will be technology that exists that enables like you and me to trade with each other, peerlessly with a Bluetooth device and just send each other money in real time. That's happening. Technology is there. Stable coins are happening. There was also an interesting press release. I think PayPal just launched literally right before we went live. PayPal have launched a stablecoin, and it's called PYUSD. I think they're doing it with Paxos, and Paxos had their own little black eye in the last cycle. But anyway, it's fully backed by US dollar deposits. But for PayPal to get in on this too, the CEO Dan Schulman envisions PYUSD becoming part of the broader payment infrastructure over time. And you know very well how important PayPal is. So that was an interesting development too, because people want to control a version of the digital dollar, and they want that 5% yield on it. So you hold your cash in PYUSD, and they're getting 5% on it. You're not. That's the irony. So
absolutely. So I think many players in the big financial markets, they haven't realized how lucrative the stablecoin business is in the current interest climate. And I'm sure they will get it. And there was also an interesting quarterly report from Coinbase, where most of Coinbase revenue is no longer from trading profits, it's from other services. And it's definitely going that way. PayPal stepping into this is very interesting development, because they are still maybe one of the few companies that are kind of between a global digital payment system and the old banking system. PayPal is kind of 50% in between. It was a big disruption when it was launched, and it is still in many ways ahead of the banking infrastructure still today, in my experience.
And even though they haven't done anything in 20 years, which is interesting. And
yeah, exactly. The website looks the same as it did 20 years ago.
And you know what's so funny is because the guy that started it has his own plans, and I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to the Everything app from Elon Musk as we go forward. That's, he has a very big plan. We're not sure exactly what it's going to be, but it will really, really disrupt a lot of TradFi and Square and PayPal and all the other players out there.
Did anyone listening, did anyone figure out since last week if there is a way to buy Twitter or X stock in a private setting without buying?
There are private markets to do that, but you have to have a lot of initial capital, like $1 million plus, and a special relationship. So,
all right. Yeah.
But not just yet. But they have started issuing stock to employees, and employees can sell their stock or grants on secondhand markets.
Yeah, because sometimes there are these, right? That someone want to sell some of their stock to buy a house, whatever, and that means that there are stocks on the market. So remember you can ask more questions and try to cover some of them during the conversation. While we continue, what about altcoins and alt season? I mean, if we look at the chart, 1 second, if I just switch this around. If we go down to Bitcoin dominance, we talked about this previously. We got the rejection, Bitcoin dominance trended up. We got the rejection, but it's kind of unconvincing. And the trend for Bitcoin dominance is still up. And which is easy to understand given how much attacks there has been on altcoins from the SEC particularly, basically questioning if there's any altcoin that isn't a unregistered security, and so on and so forth. So what is your take on the balance here, James? Do you see that this is the time for alt season? Is this the peak fear, or do you see that Bitcoin continues to dominate and lead the race for another while before liquidity spills over?
Well, my take on Bitcoin dominance, it's like comparing apples to oranges, so it doesn't really make sense. I think there's two things that are important. One is Gary Gensler pivoted away from the agency's attention to crypto onto AI. He said, we'll get to crypto later. He said this last week, I think it was last Friday. And that was a stunning revelation, because now all of a sudden it's like, what's going on here? And I believe that's because he has been told, hey, your anti-crypto vendetta is giving Democrats a bad name. We're moving into a political season. Therefore, be quiet. Stop this. Killing innovation is not an American thing to do. And that was the reputation. So he was muzzled, I believe. Could be wrong, but that was a huge switch away. And therefore, I think it also dovetails nicely into BlackRock ETF plans. I think somebody's going to pick up the phone. Larry Fink will pick up the phone, call the White House. Hey, approve this thing. Get this Gary guy out of the way. It'll be done. Boom. That's just going to happen. It's a question of not if, but when. The second thing you mentioned, altcoin season. I think we can look at this little chart here, and it looks at where we are compared to Bitcoin over the last 30 days, all the different coins. You can see Bitcoin has not been performing well compared to alts. In fact, some of them have done incredibly well. There's a couple of scam coins in that list, but that's just the nature of the beast. People are still listening to pumpers. We can't do anything about that, but there are some solid names in there that are far outperforming Bitcoin. So I think, in essence, this time is different. Altcoins are a lot more mature than they were last early bull run. It's a different situation. I do believe things like ETH could flip Bitcoin in the next 2 to 5 years. I know that's been spoken about for a long time, but I also believe there are ETH killers coming too, and different use cases for these layer 2s that tie into everything that's happening. You look at Coinbase getting into a layer 2. which has been, I think it has $100 million worth of TVL in a very short window of time. You got PayPal getting into stable coins, etc. So the good news is crypto is here to stay. It will not be killed by the SEC. And altcoin season is far more mature than it was before. And also humans are smarter this time around, and they're front running things. They're not waiting for Bitcoin to go stratospheric and then roll their stuff into alts. Alts began running. So, and there's many of them as well that have outperformed Bitcoin so far year to date. So the only one that hasn't, which is interesting, is Ethereum hasn't outperformed Bitcoin year to date, which is ironic.
It's very, very, very interesting. Let's take a couple of comments here and questions. Salt season, exactly. I mean, a key thing that we talk about many times, if you find yourself on the side of the majority, you should be worried because the majority will typically play this wrong. And the saltier you see people on Twitter, and if you're on the other side of that trade, the better, because majority by definition tend to be wrong in the market. Few people make all the money. Most people lose money. Buy Bitcoin, exactly. Rejection on the 200 EMA, just like last time on BTCD. Any thoughts? I actually not sure that these ratios, which are not really traded, can be analyzed that way. I try to focus mainly on the trend and on the horizontal boundaries, but it is definitely an insightful comment that I haven't thought about. We have, are we going to get rid of Gensler? I have no idea. But I think he has really pushed perhaps too far. I don't know. And like James said, maybe someone told him to ease up a little bit. Who knows? R&D, Tesla, no worries. This is a nothing burger. It's been 4 years. Do you understand the comment, James? I don't understand the question.
Oh, this is probably regarding the CFO of
Tesla. Yeah. It is. Sorry,
he left today, but you know what? He's done an amazing job. A CFO role is important, but you know, people sometimes think in a company you've got some person in the C-suite and think, oh, once they leave, yes, if something happened to Elon, that's a big issue. But a CFO is basically somebody that uses models and accounting and budgets. There is nobody more sophisticated in this realm than Tesla. They've built all their own ERP systems, CRM systems, analytics, insights, BI systems, and they're all integrated together. So anybody can step into those shoes. Not a big deal. But also when you work like 24/7 for 14 years, you get tired. And it's like, you know, life is short. Some people decide, you know what? It's now time for my desert island. So
exactly. Extremely tough job, I would imagine, having that. By the end of the year, I'm hoping something big will happen in crypto. Good to have some perspective. I mean, when price action is boring for a couple of weeks in a row, I get messages of people who want to give up crypto because it got too boring for them. Try not to be one of those guys and girls. Please, you have to have a longer term perspective to have any chance of success here. Just because it's boring for a couple of weeks, then, you know, go on vacation, do something else, go out in the forest, try to come back later when there is some action. Don't quit. That's the wrong action to do.
And one other point on that as well, 8 times out of 10, after Bitcoin goes through a very dormant period, guess what it does after?
Oh yeah, I think this kind of shrinking volatility until it's basically flat. What's going to follow is that's going to be some explosive movement from here for sure. Yeah. Was there any update on that huge minor sell-off last month? Probably purchase from a large entity, OTC, to avoid rocking it out. Actually, I don't know.
I think when you look at miners and Bitcoin proxies, there was a lot of interesting things happening. Again, you got to zoom out and look at the macro. So you have all of the TradFi were FOMOing into Bitcoin proxies because it couldn't buy Bitcoin direct. Therefore, things like MicroStrategy went completely overbought. All the miners, all the big miners were completely overbought. And now the world is beginning to realize that, okay, miners make a living from the Bitcoin reward. All right, many of them are only at break even. What happens when that reward is halved and the hash rate continues to go up? The answer is half will go out of business. My bogey is if Bitcoin price is not by 55,000 by April, May 2024, half of these miners are out of business, especially those with heavy debt loads. And that's what we kind of focus a lot here. So I think, like anything else, everything gets overbought and then gets oversold, and then it gets overbought again. And we're now coming back, mean reversion down to the normal position, and they may go down a little bit more. Also, as I've been saying for months, August, September, July, August, September, they're always sucky months for markets, not just crypto.
Why does the US government stick dogmatically to 2% inflation rate when a 4% rate would seem more prudent in light of the growing instability to service national debt? That's a great question.
Super smart question. In fact, there's a guy called Bernanke. He once at a press conference mentioned 2%, and that was only about 15 years ago or something. Since then, Jerome Powell's been clinging on to that 2%, and he's infected all the other central banks with this 2% target. But you know, the US Treasury is completely illiquid right now. That's Janet Yellen's shop. The Fed is what Jerome Powell does, and he's just igniting everything, not only smashing banks and commercial real estate, all that type of stuff. What's going to happen next is once the Treasury really starts to crack and break, that will alarm the markets, and then there will be a big dip. And once that happens, the money printing will go crazy. So this whole 2% thing is just BS, as they say. 3% is far more realistic. If you look at true inflation over the last 40 to 50 years, it's actually never been under 5%. And you can measure that very easily by looking at how much money, empty money supply growth has grown. It grows by 7% per year over the last 60 years. And it's all simple. If you look at the last 60 years, in fact, I tweeted this last week, you take the S&P 500, you divide it by empty money supply. 60 years, it's done nothing. You've gone nowhere. Nothing burger.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. So literally, the numbers are wrong. The numbers are false. And the numbers are contrived. And the numbers are delayed. It's all nonsense. The whole thing is a clown show. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Dogecoin, yes, like I mentioned last week, I wouldn't exclude the possibility that if X.com happens, Elon Musk's everything app, that Dogecoin becomes something more than just a joke. I don't think it's impossible at all. And as you speak, BTC dumping. Sorry about that. I think I lost the audio. Are you still there, James?
No, you're here. I will hear you. Fine.
Oh, that's great. Would a CBDC with capped supply of 21 million coins and central bank holding 1.1 million in the books be appealing? I guess then referring to that Satoshi Nakamoto mined 1.1 million early on. But the difference is here that no one really controls Bitcoin. That's the big difference. What's your take, James?
Yeah, it's interesting because when we look at we think about, you mentioned earlier, is it a pump and dump scheme? And a hat tip to Mitchell Hoddle from Blockware. I think he tweeted something the other day regarding this. That would not work for a government entity because they need to continually increase money supply to fund all of their projects, which don't do very well. But the difference between, say, CBDC and Bitcoin is there is no central authority in charge of Bitcoin. There's no one who can manipulate the price. There's no one who can dump their coins on the market. Long-term holders aren't dumping their coins because they believe in the potential. You know, what is it Michael Saylor said, and Robert Breedlove, you know, Bitcoin is an IQ test, and you get Bitcoin at the price that you deserve, which is kind of funny. And there's no better alternative as well. So that would not work for the government, is kind of my quick and dirty summary right now. They need to continually print more to fund silly projects. And as I did another tweet a week or two ago, and I basically calculated all the financial ratios. If the US government was a stock, it would be trading at zero.
Yeah.
It's completely illiquid.
You know? Yeah, exactly. It's bankrupt. In principle, you can control BTC if you own a huge amount of it, just like gold. Yeah, I mean, of course, that is the case with any commodity, definitely. And it's just that it seems like no one controls enough of it to do that. Of course, if those 1.1 million coins that are presumed lost with Satoshi Nakamoto, if suddenly 100,000 of those start moving, of course, that would have an effect on price. When do you believe we will see liquidity return into the markets? Well, James, what's your?
It's already happening. M2 money supply grew up by 3.6% over the last 2 months. Global liquidity out of Japan and China is going up. You know, remember, so one of the mistakes that people make, and this happened with the SEC when the SEC had to clamp down on altcoins, they were like, "Oh no, crypto's dead." The US doesn't matter too much. Matters like, consider it related to the amount of population, 4%, with double, triple the money of the average human on Earth, because it is a wealthy country. But it doesn't impact everything in crypto. What does is you have to zoom out and look at everything globally. How much money is there in the world? How much liquidity is being pumped in? And that's what's important. And that's just going up. But it's about to go rocket boosters on, you know, QE to infinity, probably before the end of this year in the United States. And then, like the way the central banks followed the Fed with their 2% inflation, all the other garbage we discussed today, they will also follow the Fed with the money printing. But it's actually happening behind the scenes. The BTFP program is money printing, it's quantitative easing, and so much other funny creative accounting that's happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. And we can, if you look, even at the US stock market, if you look at the US stock market, it has basically been pumping in a straight line all the way since September, October last year. And it even made an inverse head and shoulder pattern, revealing a massive buying pressure in the stock markets. So that has already happened. Oil is going up. Will that increase inflation and make Fed to tighten even more? How will this affect the market? What's your take on that?
Well, this is the biggest joke of all. I was saying this: if you want to know where inflation is going, look at the price of a barrel of oil. That's what controls inflation to a large extent. Everything else is BS. If you had to pick one indicator to find out where things are going, it's not the price of apples or bananas or oranges or electricity, it's oil. And the global demand for oil is going through the roof. Despite the EV revolution, the world is still burning it like crazy. The price is going up. Russia, OPEC, and like OPEC Plus have curtailed their production to drive up the price. The US oil reserves are at an all-time almost low. Haven't been this low since 1980. And the price is going to go up. And there's nothing, you know, when the Feds say they control inflation, they don't. And that's the biggest joke. It's like the Fed have nothing to do with the price of oil. Price of oil drives inflation. And I've been saying that since day one. And it's just, it is, again, clown world. Everything is kind of weird out there. But yeah, I do believe oil could hit $100 before kind of December, January 2024. And then inflation will be back. But then, you know, the Fed will say, our job is done. We hit 2%. Let's go back to normal 5-7% inflation. But let's just cook the books instead. Let's figure out a new way in which we measure it. And that's what they're going to
do. Exactly. So there's a lot of insights in the commodities sector, actually, that has a lot of value to in turn understand what's happening with Bitcoin. Another good question here. Vogins, does TA really work on dominance, which is percentage based? Something that can only move between 0 and 100. And absolutely, I agree with you. I think it's a danger trying to read too much into these derived charts, which aren't really trading as such. So that's why, like I said, I think that I mostly looked at the trend there. Is Bitcoin dominance trending up? Is it trending down? And are there key horizontal levels where the general size of Bitcoin versus the general size of everything else has turned around in the past? I don't really do charting on the Bitcoin dominance. So great question. I agree. I should have mentioned that. There were more great questions here. They keep scrolling up. Wrapped BTC. So wrapped BTC is Bitcoin, but you kind of trade it on another chain like Ethereum or Solana or any other channel. The risk with it is that something goes wrong. You are taking a bigger risk than if you're owning Bitcoin directly. And what you gain is then the convenience of being able to do it, trade it on something like Uniswap or something like that. But there are actually layer one DEXs now that are available. So I would guess that the wrapped systems will get less dominant in the future.
Yeah, be careful of anything wrapped, anything that's not what I call pure form. It's very risky.
Yeah, definitely high risk. So don't see it as the same thing. It is, the upside is the same, but the downside is bigger. So it's a higher risk. If the BTC would be 1 million in 2030, would a loaf of bread be $20? Yes.
It'd be a lot more.
So exactly, it could be even more. So when people say that it's crazy, Bitcoin can never go to $1 million, it can definitely go to $1 million. But be also aware that each dollar is getting less and less worth all the time. That's why if you look at the stock market and zoom out for 100, 150 years, it's basically a straight line up on the logarithmic chart. And that will probably continue. The stock market will probably continue to go up forever in dollar because the dollars gets less worth. And so if saving money in dollars and not kind of keeping up with the inflation, you're losing money. So I think that assuming this Bitcoin experiment succeeds, it will probably also go up forever. And the price of loaf of bread will also go up forever. And the stock market will go up forever. And the gold will go up forever. Everything will go up forever as measured in dollar losing value. BlackRock thinks the BTC should only be for elites. He said it in Davos. Okay, that's interesting. I don't think that this experiment is going to work out if it is only for the elites. I think that either Bitcoin becomes huge and kind of recognized. People will not associate Bitcoin with Bitcoin scam. They will associate it with something that is reliable and trustworthy. Or it's going to get replaced by some other blockchain. Let's see, what do we have? Can we get to $40,000 in BTC first? 1 million torque is still a little far away. Yeah, absolutely. If we will get to 1 million, we will probably get to 40,000 first. Yeah. Should we take a couple of more? Exactly. Can
Yeah,
we get to
two
68K
more
before
questions.
taking?
There was actually a very good tweet last night regarding the price of groceries. Jason from the All In podcast, his Twitter handle is at Jason. I can't pull it up, or maybe I can share my screen. But basically said 3 bags of groceries, $350. And he said everything is $12 now. So when the question came in, will a loaf of bread be $20? It's going to be a lot more than $20. And just remember as well, the half-life of money is less than 10 years. So if you have $100 now, it's going to be worth maybe $40 in 10 years in terms of purchasing power.
Absolutely. And that's why I showed these, that there might be $100,000 bills, and there might be like $2,000 bills that are flimsy and kind of look like this in the future. If we
What will
still
that
have
what will that buy you in
that.
Vietnam? By the way, can you get a coffee for 100,000? Or is
Yeah,
that
so you can, yeah, absolutely. So 20,000 Vietnam dong is $1 approximately. And then since generally everything is more efficient in Asia, the money goes much further than it does in the West. If you go and buy noodles or something on the street.
good?
And definitely, so this will definitely happening. Right, inflation like Venezuela definitely can happen in the West as well. Inflation is going out of spiraling out of control. ESG, or thoughts of the ESG compliant BTC proxy, if it's ever released.
Yeah, Larry Fink turned his back on ESG. He doesn't want to be associated with anymore because he was the father of ESG, and now ESG has such a black eye in the marketplace. Nobody wants to touch it. So that whole thing, blood coin, blood-free Bitcoin, virgin Bitcoin, whatever you want to call it, from clean energy, that's nonsense. Not going to happen.
Yeah. If you drop your money on the floor and the vacuum gets it, it's sucking gold. That is true. Have you had your retina scanned yet? Not to get any world coin, but I mean, if you're traveling, as many people are, you may not realize it, but sometimes you do those fingerprint scans at the airport in, say, Bangkok or something like that. They keep those and they keep track of them. So a friend of mine came back later. He had changed nationality and everything, but because many years before he had been there before, and they said, yeah, but why do you have this passport? Last time you were here 8 years ago, you had a different nationality. So these kind of storage of biometrics are already happening, and we might not really realize it because it seems kind of unintrusive when traveling around the world, but that's already happening. Should we take one final question? We're 15 minutes overdue, I see here.
I need to go prep for another meeting real soon, but I love all the people here. I recognize everybody in the chat. TND Tesla and Bill Wammers and Cybertooth Tiger and all the usual Rusty bots. Be kind but shrewd, all great people, and glad everyone
exactly. Thanks, guys, for asking a lot of great questions. I saw that now I can't find it here, but there was one question earlier. I saw you repeated it several times because you really wanted the answer. And the question was, will you, it's not this one that I'm highlighting, will you try to sell BTC at the top? And me as a trader, I will try to time the cycle top and try to rebuy at the cycle bottom. Absolutely. How about you, James? Are you trying to time the market, or are you holding?
It depends. I'll probably hedge it. Well, because I will be in a combination of positions, MicroStrategy and some Bitcoin miners, and also Bitcoin. But I'll see exactly what the options pricing is. But I would probably rather hedge than incur big capital gains. You know,
Yeah.
if you look at, say, my average cost base now is like $9,300 or something. If it goes, say, to 100, I got to pay taxes on $90,000, and sometimes it's better to hedge and then keep the pristine asset if at all possible. But we'll see when the time comes. Definitely, it might be prudent to take some cash off the table and use that to fund insurance, which is hedging. So we don't know
And then,
until we see where it goes, what the on-chain looks like. You know, technically, everything could be very different this time. Looking at the actual scarcity, if you know, it's not beyond the shadow of a doubt that if BlackRock comes in, they will be buying up 10x the daily supply that's issued, and price will go parabolic if that happens. They have so much money at their fingertips, and a lot of their clients, institutional clients, are waiting to get their hands on a Bitcoin ETF. When that happens, it's so scarce, so little on exchanges, the miners will be producing so little, we could see something very special. Supply crunch on steroids. And that's it. It's all about supply and demand, and that's why I'm fascinated by Bitcoin.
Exactly. Maybe I end with this great follow-up question. During the next bull run, how can we front run the eventual downturn? So I think the short answer here is that I answered the question where you try to sell the top, but actually you can never know that it's the top at the top. You can only know it sometime after, and that's the objective with my process, to try to figure out as quickly as possible after the top that the trend has turned around. But the ambition to buy the bottom and sell the top, that's unrealistic. But of course the ambition is to try to front run most of the downturn. Yes, that is definitely the ambition. So BlackRock just want to make money as well. Absolutely, they are probably not interested in this Bitcoin ETF out of charity. They want to make money. We all probably here are trying to make money on this, as well as it's very interesting to study the society impacts of Bitcoin and what's happening around the globe. And I think there is no better university on the planet that to understand technology, to understand markets, to understand technical analysis, macroeconomics, and everything, than to study what is happening in the world right now in this intersection between finance, society, lawmaking, countries, technology, and what a time to be alive. I am fascinated, and I'm going to be back in Sweden in about a week, and then I'll have better internet access as well. Don't forget to subscribe to James Invest Answers. Link is in the description, but I'm sure you all are. Thank you, James. Any final words?
No, thanks everybody for coming, and travel safe, my friend. And hopefully you're not traveling next Monday.
Absolutely not traveling next Monday. I will plan the travel around the Monday schedule. So
awesome.
I will be on.
We'll see you next Monday. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Next Monday too. See you guys. Bye.
Bye.